Hi everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to today's session on career basics, resumes, and cover letters. I'm Catherine Leblanc. I am the co-chair of the New Brunswick Federal Youth Network, and in my real day job, I'm a senior project coordinator at the Government of Canada Pension Centre. Bonjour, bienvenue à la séance Notions de base de carrière, CV et lettres de présentation. Mon nom, c'est Catherine Leblanc. Je suis la coprésidente du réseau des jeunes fonctionnaires fédéraux du Nouveau-Brunswick. Et dans mon travail quotidien, je suis la coordonnatrice principale de projet au sein des pensions du gouvernement du Canada. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I'm joining you from is the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be present on this territory. Et je vous invite aussi, chacun de votre côté, à prendre un moment pour reconnaître les terres sur lesquelles vous êtes présent ou présente. Today's session is bilingual, so I will ask questions in both English and French to our panelists, and I'll invite them to alternate their answers in both official languages. La session d'aujourd'hui est bilingue, alors je vais poser les questions en anglais et en français. J'inviterai aussi les panélistes à alterner leurs réponses dans les deux langues officielles. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat in the official language of your choice, obviously. And you can ask your questions in the Q&A section. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A button, and then you can submit your questions. You can also upvote the questions for which you would like us to answer during the session. Donc, on va progresser aujourd'hui. Au fur et à mesure qu'on progresse aujourd'hui, vous pouvez communiquer ou discuter avec les autres participants dans la section chat, et vous pouvez aussi soumettre vos questions dans l'option questions-réponses, Q&A, QA. Et vous pouvez aussi voter pour les questions qui vous intéressent le plus ou les questions qui sont posées qui vous intéressent le plus. Today we have three panelists joining us. They will share their experience, their expertise, and their thoughts on the subject. Donc, j'aimerais souhaiter la bienvenue à Simon Gascon, à Terry Wiseman, et à Jennifer McDougall. So I'll give each of you a minute to present yourself and to tell us what you're bringing to this panel today. So, c'est quoi que vous apportez à ce panel aujourd'hui? On peut peut-être commencer avec Jennifer.
I was on mute when I started. Okay, now I'm ready. I'm Jennifer McDougall. I am the Senior Manager of Partnerships and Events for the Federal Youth Network. I have been working with the Canada School for just over a decade or so, delivering sessions on how to apply for jobs. I have applied for lots of jobs as a public servant for the last 13 years, and I've been successful. I just want you to know I've learned the hard way a couple of times, but now I understand the process. And so I've kind of made it my passion to help others understand the process, because the process, once you understand it, is not that complicated, but understanding it seems to be the hard part. So I'm here to share some practical tips and tricks that I've learned along the way.
All right, merci beaucoup, Jen. Terry.
Yes, hi, Terry Wiseman. Bonjour, mon nom c'est Terry Wiseman. Je suis conseiller principal en ressources humaines à la Commission de la fonction publique. So I'm Senior HR Advisor at the Public Service Commission. I've been involved in staffing in the public service for 20 years now, including corporate policy. You know, I'm aware of the trends and hoping that we can share some information today that will, as Jen mentioned, will help you with your understanding of the hiring process and where managers who make the assessment are coming from.
Thank you, Terry. Merci beaucoup. And last but not least, Simon.
Bonjour tout le monde, Simon Gascon ici, content d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Je travaille à l'Agence de la santé publique avec le Chief Data Officer Et puis, j'ai 15 ans d'expérience en ressources humaines. J'ai géré les groupes opérationnels corporatifs. J'ai quitté les ressources humaines après ça pour aller en IT et puis ensuite pour me rejoindre à l'agence. Donc, ça va me faire plaisir de partager un peu d'expérience avec vous, tant du côté d'avis et conseils que du côté de gestionnaire responsable de processus. Bien hâte de voir vos questions.
All right, merci beaucoup à vous trois. Thank you to all three of you for being here today. So let's get right to it. Let's get to our questions. And again, if you have any questions or if any discussions prompt any questions or comments on your behalf, please feel free to use the chat and the Q&A section. Donc, n'hésitez surtout pas à soumettre vos questions pendant la conversation. On va tenter d'y répondre pendant qu'on discute. Donc, la première question, je vais la lancer à Terry, juste parce que tu travailles à la Commission de la fonction publique, puis vous êtes comme l'organisme qui s'occupe du processus, si vous voulez, au moins du site web, emploi.gc.ca. So why are Government of Canada resumes and cover letters so different from the private sector? I know from what I learned when I was in university, everything had to be short and sweet, and hiring managers don't have time to read through that. So, and then you apply to the federal government, and it's completely the opposite. So, pourquoi les CV et les lettres de présentation sont-ils aussi différents à la fonction publique ou au secteur privé? Donc, give you a few minutes to answer the question.
Great. All right, I'll start this one in English, but I could certainly answer any questions about it in French as well. The main reason is for the differences is that the public service employment is subject to an act. And don't worry, I'm not going to go too deep into that. But what comes out of that is to be consistent in staffing across all these departments so of course we have rules, but managers are assessing based on qualifications, what we call a statement of merit criteria. But just to sum up what that means is there are different sections, different requirements for any job. And what we're looking at are what is essential. So what are the must-haves? We can also have nice-to-haves in there. Of course, there's also the education requirement. So anyone who's looked at a Government of Canada poster, you've seen this information, what are the linguistic requirements and any conditions of employment. So you have to be sure to address all of those requirements that are listed in a poster. I think I'll stop there. Definitely.
Oh, alors, I was just gonna summarize what we were just saying in French. So, juste pour faire un bref résumé, les gestionnaires qui embauchent, la raison pourquoi les CV, les lettres de présentation sont si longues, c'est parce que c'est pour s'assurer qu'il y a une consistance. C'est consistant dans toutes les applications, dans tous les processus. Puis, c'est aussi pour évaluer les critères de mérite. Donc, c'est ça qui est le gros enjeu ou la grosse chose avec les CV et les lettres de présentation. Jen, Simon, est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à ajouter là-dessus? Anything to add to what Terry just mentioned?
I'll go ahead because I do a lot of work with folks who are new to the public service and they're like, oh my goodness, why is this process so long? This is ridiculous. Why do I have to write this out so many times? This is obvious. Why do I have to write that? And I think it comes back to, it's a question of fairness. So Terry kind of brought that up about the Public Service Employment Act. Like, it has to be fair to everyone. And so we can't make assumptions that because you worked in that department, you know that, or because you worked on that team, you did that. You have to break it all the way down. Like, we don't know anything every time. And that's why it is so time consuming and the documents are so long. And we will kind of get into that a little bit, but I agree that when I'm applying for a job, I'm like, oh, it's going to be so long and I don't want to do it. And it's so much work. We all feel the same way, but it is out of fairness so that we're all starting on an equal playing field and there are no assumptions made and there are no mistakes made. And it's easier to be sure that we're choosing the right candidate for the right reasons. So it's for your own protection that it is so much work, I think. Simon, did you want to add anything?
Mm-hmm.
Well, juste une petite chose peut-être parce que vous êtes tous les deux très éloquents et connaisseurs. pour les processus externes, c'est sûr et certain qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup de recours, mais à l'interne, il y a beaucoup de recours possibles, imaginables. Donc, il y a une possibilité d'avoir beaucoup de feedback. Et puis, le feedback va être aussi structuré que le processus l'est. Donc, je pense que ça, c'est important aussi pour que les gens comprennent, parce qu'il y a toujours une possibilité de se plaindre d'un processus pour X raisons. Et c'est pour ça que les processus sont aussi structurés. Voilà.
Merci Simon. Thanks, Jen. Again, so Jen was just saying, ou Jen était juste en train de dire que le processus est aussi long pour être juste et être capable de choisir le bon ou la bonne candidate pour le poste. Puis, and Simon was saying that you can also get a lot of feedback through these lengthy processes because people are looking through a lot of information on your behalf, on you. So you can, it's built to be able to have feedback. OK, let's get to the next question. La prochaine question, c'est quand j'ai besoin d'une lettre de présentation. When do I need a cover letter? Bon, je sais pas, I don't know if Jen or Terry wants to get into it, but...
Well,
moi, je suis correcte. Oh, vas-y, Terry.
Okay. Yeah, I've got my name next to this one. And this is oh non, celui-ci, j'allais répondre en français. Donc, quand est-ce que j'ai besoin d'une page de couverture? C'est un peu simple, mais quand c'est demandé. Donc, quand je mentionnais la fiche, c'est très important de regarder qu'est-ce qui est demandé en termes de votre information. Même des fois, il y a des choses dans des postes plus spécifiques, en plus de même un CV et une page de couverture. Disons que c'est un poste d'ingénierie, il y a des fois des demandes de fournir de l'information de votre expérience d'un autre format. Donc, c'est très important de voir qu'est-ce qui est demandé dans la lettre de couverture et de respecter les limites. C'est très important des fois, les limites sont tellement hautes, ce n'est pas un problème, mais c'est très important de revoir c'est quoi qui est demandé dans la lettre de couverture. C'est indiqué assez clairement dans les affiches.
Jen?
So I'm going to switch to English because now we're like flipping back and forth. So I'm like, I'll take advantage of being able to speak English. Mais parlez si vous avez des questions en français. Having a letter, you don't always need the letter the way it is, but consider the letter like a repository of all of those experience factors that you've written for another job. So sometimes you send it as a chunk, like as a letter, but sometimes you have to take each chunk and put it in a different box on the jobs.dc.ca. So sometimes that's what's happening. And so keeping those letters forever and ever is really helpful so that if you get a similar experience factor, you don't necessarily have to start from scratch when you're describing how you meet it and demonstrating that you have those competencies. So I kind of consider them more of a repository than an actual letter, because I find the term letter to me is deceiving, because it's not like, dear Simon, I think I would be great on your team. I have this, I want to do that. But no, it's not really that. So the term letter is a little bit deceiving in itself. And I think that that's why people kind of get caught up in what it is that they're putting together. And now Simon and Terry, both of you probably know way more about this than I do, but if I'm not mistaken, your cover letter also sometimes demonstrates competencies if you're going to do an acting or if you're going to be in a non-advertised appointment, and there is a SOMC to compare that to as well, right? So having those ready and just in case, I think are always kind of handy. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Always.
Just known as a paper exercise, so it can be assessed without an interview process, depending on the on exactly what the appointment process the manager has decided on. And there was just something I wanted to echo what Jen had said in terms of the. You're really to have it position specific, really understand, and this might be covered a little later, but really understanding what the opportunity is and what those qualifications mean before you get started and say, well, I'm going to answer this question this way and provide this information, is really make sure you understand what is being asked as best possible. Do your research. There's competency. Jobs are based on competencies established by Treasury Board, and that information is available in terms of what a qualification means. And I know that I don't want to steal Simon's thunder. He's going to speak a little more about that later.
Yeah, I was just going to say the next question I had for you guys was on that topic exactly. So what kind of tips do you have? I know you just mentioned a few, Terry, but what kind of tips would you have on presenting your experience? Either, I know Jen mentioned cover letters, but in real life, it's not necessarily a cover letter, it's pre-screening questions, les questions de présélection. Donc, c'est quoi les trucs que vous avez pour les gens qui remplissent des applications pour décrire l'expérience qu'ils ou elles ont soit dans une lettre ou soit dans les questions de présélection. Je pense que la dernière fois qu'on s'en était parlé, je pense que Simon avait beaucoup de choses à dire à ce sujet, donc je vais laisser la parole à Simon.
Bonjour, merci. Oui, c'est par expérience que j'avais soulevé ces points-là là, quand on s'était préparé pour vous rencontrer aujourd'hui, tout le monde. C'est qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui appliquent sur les concours. Puis les concours au fédéral, il y a quand même une structure de base, surtout les processus internes. Donc, if I'm already a public servant and I'm applying on an internal process, that is even more structured because of all the recourse right. I need to make sure that I've covered all my bases, that I have a solid process, and if somebody disagrees with the results, that they can challenge it, and I can prove that I didn't commit any faults or any crime in in publicizing the results. So when people are preparing, quand les gens se préparent pour ces processus-là, souvent, une des fautes qu'on voit, c'est que les gens ont une idée dans leur tête de ce qui est demandé, mais la valident pas. And that's where a lot of people do the mistake. So when you have a CV and a cover letter and you're applying on a process, so I'm imagining that right now I'm talking to mostly public servants, but there might be some people from outside the public service as well. Ça va être écrit sur le poster. You need to present or prepare a cover letter in addition to your CV, or just send us the CV. No need for a cover letter. It depends how the manager wants to manage the process. Fait que ça, c'est important. It's very important to be to the point and very short and sweet, and please don't repeat yourselves in any of those documents. If I'm opening an external process, I'll get thousands of applicants. If I open an internal process, I'll get hundreds of applicants. I love you all, but I hate reading CVs and cover letters, no matter who you are. Donc, plus c'est court, plus c'est to the point, the better the impression of you is. And then there's the gentle art of being very factual about yourself, but still telling me a story. So if Jen applies on one of my process, I know Jen, but if I wouldn't know her, I would still be probably very intrigued by her application, because Jen always has this ability of telling stories that when she speaks and being able to kind of personalize and figure out ways that I can relate to what she wrote in her cover letter and her CV. So that's why I would like to hire her, because her trademark is very clear, and that's why she's so good at what she does. Puis, pour revenir un peu au fait de bien se préparer, souvent les gens ils se trompent. Give me an example in which or experience, knowledge of initiative, for example, or ability to demonstrate initiatives. Puis les gens ils font, c'est quoi l'initiative? Ah, ben moi, écoute, j'ai déjà pris un projet, là, puis j'avais une équipe, là, puis là, je l'ai géré, je l'ai planifié, je l'ai bien fait, je l'ai mené à terme, puis j'ai délivré les résultats. Tu sais, j'ai fait preuve de beaucoup d'initiatives. Yeah, that's leadership. Ou je demande à quelqu'un, donnez-moi un exemple où est-ce que vous avez fait preuve de tact. Puis ils me décrivent, I was in a difficult situation, and then I followed the due process. I called labor relations, and I really, was careful about doing all the step by step. That's not tact. You don't have to be careful about managing the process. You have to be careful in everything that you say and do with an individual. Fait que souvent, les gens, ils pensent qu'ils savent de quoi ils parlent, mais ils sont juste à côté de la traque de la définition officielle qui va être utilisée soit dans le dictionnaire de compétences du ministère, ou simplement ouvrir un dictionnaire. So make sure that you are very, very clear on the definition of the different requirements in the process and that you prepare accordingly. Judgment is another one that people miss all the time because they talk to me about analysis. Okay, but when you do the analysis and you come up with two very good recommendations or two very bad recommendations because you're in a bad situation, what you recommend and how you recommend it and why is judgment. So, ça, c'est des erreurs que je vois souvent arriver. Jen?
Oh, I'm excited to jump in. So I understand, and I love what you were saying, but I think for me, the part that you did, Simon, would be maybe step 2. So what I do for step 1 is I actually cut the words out of the statement of merit. and I put it in a Word document. Now I'm old, so maybe I'm not supposed to use Word, I don't know, but I take the words, okay, so they want me to explain when I provided strategic direction to senior leadership, recent, significant, all that stuff. I take all the words and I put them into Word. And then I'm like, okay, then I start Googling some of the definitions, like Simon was saying, like, what are they really looking for? And I make a little outline, and then I make my little essay about that statement. So I know that for me, the way I do my letters, and I actually do it like that for all of them, no matter what the format is in the template that they're using on jobs.gc.ca, is I always take exactly what they said they were looking for, and then I write my little paragraph of how I do that. And I know that we're going to talk about that today, but we always use the STAR when we're telling our story. So we'll dig into STAR a little deeper. If no one knows that, that's going to be a golden nugget to take away from today. But yeah, so knowing the definition, I think I do that second. First, I'm like, okay, what are they asking? Because there's essentials, there's assets. I always miss education because it's like above essentials. I'm like, oh, they asked education, I better put that in here. I'll make sure I got that. So I go over it and over and over it. I often print it and use a highlighter. Again, super old school. I'm like, oh, it says here I have to put my language levels, or it says here I have to put my classification, or those are little things. I'm like, oh, you could get in trouble for not doing that. So I go through it several times and make the bones of what it is I'm going to put together, my little structure, and then I start to fill it in with the meat. And the meat is what Simon was talking about, like find the definition and then find an example of a story where you did that definition. And initiative makes me laugh every time, Simon. It's my favorite one, because if it was your job, it's not initiative. Like if I told you to do something, you didn't take initiative, you did what you were told. That's two different things. So I think that there's a lot of like nuances that people kind of get wrong, and it's a great story. It just doesn't demonstrate that. And I think that we all have an ability to tell great stories, but we don't always have the ability to demonstrate the factor that they're being assessed on in that great story. Terry, do you want to jump in and add?
Well, I think this is a good time to explain what the acronym STAR stands for, so I can do that. Mes excuses pour le monde qui écoute en français que je ne sais pas l'acronyme, mais je peux décrire en français c'est quoi les facteurs qu'on discute. Donc, en parlant de répondre aux questions comme Simon et Jen ont très bien expliqué, disons que c'est un facteur d'expérience. Donc, on veut savoir des exemples de comment vous avez démontré cette expérience. Donc, commencer avec S, la situation. T, les tâches. Donc, c'est quoi vos responsabilités? Il faut être très clair si c'est partie d'une équipe, mais c'est quoi vos responsabilités dans une équipe? C'est quoi les actions que vous avez prises pour corriger la situation ou aller de l'avant avec le projet ou la tâche? Et c'est quoi les résultats? Celui-là est souvent oublié en termes de c'est quoi quand on est sorti? On veut savoir c'est quoi les résultats de vos actions. Donc, ce sont les étapes. And Catherine, did you want me to repeat it in English since I have it in front of me?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
So, STAR stands for Situation, Task, Action, and Result. And we will make this information, I'm sure we'll be able to find a link for the resources links afterwards. So describe an event, a project, or a challenge you face. So that's the situation you're facing. When describing your experience, what are your responsibilities and assignments for the situation? So what were your tasks? The third one is A for action. What steps did you take to rectify the situation or to move the project forward? And what were the results of those actions?
I think those are all really great tips. I know Jen personally, so I've used her tips before on highlighting, and I've followed a few of her classes when she was at the Canada School of Public Service. C'est vraiment tous des bons trucs pour remplir votre application. Puis, il y a beaucoup de questions dans la section Q&A, mais il y en a quelques-unes que j'ai déjà sur ma liste puis qu'on va en discuter. Fait que je ne répondrai pas tout de suite, mais à la fin de la conversation, j'irai chercher quelques questions. Il y en a plusieurs qui sont intéressantes, puis je vois qu'il y a même des panélistes qui répondent aux questions. So, some panelists are answering the questions in the Q&A section. I'll try to cover as much in the questions I already have ready for the panelists, but we will answer some of them further into the session. So I think,
can I jump in, Catherine, and just talk about the essence situation? I think that a lot of people get action, and I think sometimes people get task. Situation, I tell it like a fairy tale. So like once upon a time in a faraway land, there was so when I was working at the Canada School of Public Service as a learning advisor in 2008, we were working on, so then you kind of are laying the groundwork, and that's the part, and I know we're going to touch on that, so hopefully I'm not jumping too many steps ahead. Like that's the part that we're going to check on your resume. Was she a learning advisor in 2008 at the Canada School of Public Service? So that's how you frame your story. So the situation isn't, I was fighting with one of my colleagues and I had to demonstrate tact because they did this. No, that's really more about the task and the action. The situation needs to tell us where were you? How did you end up in this position? What were you responsible for? What year was this? Is it recent and significant? Because that comes up a lot with those stars. Watch those stars on the statement of merit, recent, significant. Those ones get me every time. So make sure that you're telling your story like it's a story. So where were you? Why were you there? What was your role? Okay, sorry, Catherine.
No, that's okay.
Some people don't start their story right. Don't just jump in with the princess was in the tower. How did she get there? What land are we in? What's the season? So figure out what's going on in your story.
Donc, ce que Jen disait, c'était juste de s'assurer de bien définir son histoire. Donc, le S dans Star, Situation, Situation, c'est de bien définir où est-ce que vous étiez, que ce soit le poste, l'année, le ministère, où est-ce que vous travaillez, de bien le définir quand vous répondez ou quand vous utilisez cette méthode-là pour répondre à vos questions. Donc, je pense qu'on a répondu à pas mal les questions que j'avais ici, mais la prochaine question que j'avais ici, mais how often should I update my resume and my cover letter? Or, you know, I know we've talked about cover letters not being an actual thing and more using screening questions, des questions de présélection. So how often should I update that? Either using, you know, either method or regardless of how you're updating it, but how often should it be done?
The correct answer is all the time. It's an evergreen document. So every time there's a change in your responsibilities or a change in your role, you should update it. Does anyone do that? I would dare say probably not. So more about when you think about doing it, do it. Know where it is. Know how up to date it is. I actually got asked for mine last week and I was like, please let me find a recent one. Please let me have updated it recently. I don't want to start from scratch and have to figure out like when was I acting and what was this job. Obviously mine's fairly up to date, but it's not like up to date day by day. So keep it up to date as you can. It's an evergreen document. You should keep your most current version handy because it's not when you're working on a process and you have 24 hours to write your letter and resume that you want to have to start digging around looking for what year did you graduate university or what year did you get that certification. You don't want to dig. It should be easily accessible.
Oui, c'est très bien. Jen disait juste de garder à jour constamment. C'est à chaque fois qu'il y a un changement. Moi, un des meilleurs conseils que j'ai reçus dans ma carrière, c'était de garder une espèce de journal de compétences. Donc, quand je sais que j'ai acquis différentes compétences ou j'ai travaillé sur un projet, de garder un journal avec, puis je dis journal, it doesn't need to be an actual journal. I was just saying that one of the best advice that I received was to keep a kind of competency journal. And so it's easier as well when you're applying, when you have this list of competencies to fill out on jobs.gc.ca and you just saw the poster 24 hours before it's due. So Terry, Simon, anything to add on the length of a cover letter, or not the length, but when it should be updated?
That was actually really well described by Jen, and I liked your example. So as far as the CV, that's exactly it, is when there's a significant change. And one thing, I think what I'd rather share is in terms of a resource that can be used to gather the information that was just described there very well, is everybody's favorite time of year is performance management. Appraisals are coming up. Donc, les évaluations de rendement s'en viennent. So fun times, everybody, where you get assessed by your supervisor, but it's an opportunity because they're putting in writing what you've done over the past year, and that comes back to the results I was talking about earlier. So I think it's that's an important resource, and with the system we have now, you have the older performance management, past performance management agreements where you can go back, because nobody's memory is perfect. So okay, I remember doing this a few years ago, but what were the results and what else was involved. So that's for refreshing your memory, for understanding how someone else saw what you did, for experience in your past accomplishments, and that's the other thing is showing like accomplished, not just the results of what happened, but it's like what anything special that came of it. That often appears in a performance management agreement. So I think that's a good source of information for people.
Simon, quelque chose à ajouter?
Well, I've been answering some of the questions in the Q's and A's, and I like to be more straight to the point and factual. What length should it be? The shortest length possible for you to be able to express everything you wanted to say. Comme il n'y a pas vraiment de bonne ou de mauvaise approche. C'est sûr et certain que je peux vous dire que quand je fais des concours, puis j'ai des gens qui ont des PhD qui m'envoient des CV de 33 pages, ça commence mal un processus. Ça ne donne pas une bonne première impression. J'ai des gens qui réussissent en dedans de 2 pages à me décrire assez de leur expérience, que je les sur papier, je semble les trouver déjà extraordinaires, puis j'ai hâte de les rencontrer en entrevue. Donc, il n'y a pas de bonne ou de mauvaise recette. Il y a une façon, il y a une structure, une façon d'être. Everybody has their own writing styles. It's not because you're a better writer or you're a better talker that you have more chances. I think, I've seen people coming in very shy, very straight to the point, very few words, and still completely ace processes. There's also, we have to be careful about, the biasness of different cultures and different backgrounds. Some cultures, they love to brag about everything that they did. Some cultures, that's not very well perceived, and so therefore they will be very careful about it. Puis faites attention aussi, parce que ça m'amène à un autre point quand Terry parlait, puis c'est super important. So I'm going to make a very sexist remarks. Ready? Careful, because women have a tendency towards biasness in terms of they don't sell themselves or affirm themselves as much as men do in their CV. Un gars va gérer, diriger, contrôler, rapporter, etc. Une femme va contribuer, collaborer, puis c'est pas tout le monde qui fait ça, mais c'est quelque chose qui a été étudié, qui a été démontré. Donc, souvent, quand je fais du mentorat avec des personnes de la gente féminine, I'm very careful about telling them, like, let's review your CV together and let's see how you're selling yourselves, because that is something that we've seen as well that is part of unconscious biasness sometimes. That's it. That was my sexist comment of today.
Go ahead, Jen.
Actually, I want to add to what Simon said, and I think that it's part of kind of Canadian culture to not be bragging about yourself, right? And we have a hard time knowing like when we're supposed to take credit for something and when we're supposed to share credit for something. And we're even taught that in elementary school, like when you did a group project with someone and they didn't pull their weight, it's not like you threw them under the bus and they got a 0. Like that's not how life is. And so we have a hard time knowing like what the team did and what we did and articulating what we owned and what we led and what we were responsible for without seeming arrogant and entitled. So that is a really tricky balance. And in the resources, actually, we've already uploaded them for you. We've given you kind of a cheat sheet, which is action verbs. You should always use action verbs to kind of say the things that you were doing to like demonstrate what it was. And you're right, Simon, then even within that, there's stronger ones and weaker ones. Collaborated, well, collaborated is what? Like, I think it's funny when I see on things, I attended meetings. Well, I have lots of people attend some of my meetings who don't do anything. So congratulations that you attended and drank coffee. You ate the free donuts. Like I'm not going to give you a job for having done that, but did you chair the meeting? Did you contribute? Did you engage others? Did you present? Like, so those action verbs are really going to help you. And we've put together some resources with action verbs to help you kind of figure out what it is that you've done that you can brag about, but not like brag. I kind of helped you out there, I hope, Simon. I think it's about the language that we use, and you don't want to say I tried to, or I was responsible for. Another one I yell at people all the time when they put I was responsible for. Well, Catherine is responsible for moderating this session. She showed up, so does she pass? Well, I don't know. Did she do a good job? Well, she was responsible. So I think that's the thing. Just because you were responsible to do something doesn't even mean you did it. My kids are responsible to clean their rooms. They don't do that. But so it's important to figure out the words that you use, and like Simon said, so that you can concisely tell me what you're good at and what you did.
Oui, puis je pense que c'est super important ce que tu dis, Jen, parce que dans le fond, ce que vous voulez faire comprendre aux gens, c'est la profondeur, l'étendue de votre expérience. So the depth and breadth of your experience, right? If I'm responsible for something, I'm responsible for what? I was responsible to deliver something, achieve a result, manage people, manage a budget. So at least now I know what was the responsibility, and I can assess whether you've delivered on it or not. And don't fall short. Don't leave us hanging. That's the important point.
So to go back to the STAR method, basically make sure you have your results included in your whatever you're answering to. So just like you were saying, not leaving people hanging. So en gros, ce qu'on disait en anglais, juste pour répéter rapidement en français, d'utiliser les verbes actifs, essayer d'éviter des choses qui englobent trop de gens, mais essayer de démontrer qu'est-ce que toi tu fais ou qu'est-ce que toi tu as apporté à tel ou tel projet, ou peu importe la compétence que tu essaies de démontrer dans tes réponses. Dernière question. En fait, il y a plusieurs questions dans le Q&A. Fait que je vais aller à ça. Puis, je sais pas, je vais laisser la porte ouverte à qui veut la répondre. Donc, I'm going to go to the Q&A questions because there's a lot of them and they're really interesting. And whoever wants to take it, go ahead. But how far back should we go on a resume? I know everybody kind of said that your resume can't be too long, or you don't like long resumes, or so. Comment loin on va dans notre CV? Est-ce que je mets mon expérience de quand j'avais 14 ans, puis je travaillais un petit dépanneur, ou j'arrête à l'université? Ou how far back should we go on our resumes? I don't know, Terry, I see you're unmuted, so Terry, je te laisse la parole.
Yes, and to echo what Simon was saying earlier is to ensure in the most efficient manner possible you're demonstrating that you can meet the qualifications. So once that's there in terms of if it's asked for a certain level of education, make sure your education is well mentioned. That's relevant. So relevance is really the thing. It's again understanding the qualifications. And then saying, well, asking yourself, does this experience from many moons ago in a different field really apply? And that's where, that's a matter of understanding the qualifications. So it's like most answers in staffing, it depends on whether it's relevant or not. And so as far as how far back, here's something that gets missed often is watch out for technology. Sometimes there's technology asked for. Make sure you're answering that correctly, but that slips through. And we mentioned a little bit about the screening questions. This is where you probably see this a little more in terms of demonstrating that relevant experience, and also recent is asked for. So recent and significant are the terms in English. it has to be clear that you demonstrated that qualification, you meet that factor, and you have that experience from within the time period that's stated.
Jen, Simon, anything to add?
Ben, vous avez donné un bon exemple, Catherine. Lorsque vous avez travaillé à 14 ans à une dépanneur, si vous avez peut-être 18 ans maintenant, puis pendant que vous travaillez au dépanneur, tu faisais les finances du dépanneur et les dépôts, puis tu gérais la cédule d'autres mondes, ça se peut qu'on pourrait mettre ça. Mais moi, comme je gardais des enfants quand j'avais 12 ans, mais je garde plus les enfants, ça vaut rien de mettre ça sur mon CV. So, it really depends on what it is and why you're putting it. And like Terry said, there is no steadfast rule as to how far back or exactly what needs to be there, but it has to be relevant to what it is you're applying for. So if when Catherine worked at that convenience store, they had a certain software, maybe that convenience store was using SAP and Catherine became a wizard at SAP at 14 years old. I saw Terry's eyebrows go up. So, well, then, yes, you should definitely put that if you know how to use SAP. But otherwise, it's not really valuable. But there was another question in the chat before I go to you, Simon, that talked about, can your things outside of the government be put on your resume and in your cover letter? And absolutely. But it just depends on what, because we don't care about your babysitting or your paper routes or, you know, that you worked at Winners necessarily and you have good fashion taste. But maybe we do. Simon.
Yeah.
But it also, ça dépend aussi de qui ce que t'es, right? If you worked at McDonald's and you worked at McDonald's for more than a year, then I know you're somebody who's been through a rigorous training process and who's been probably asked to do stuff that you didn't want to do, and yet you did it because that's how McDonald's operates. And so usually I see that as, you know, very valid experience. Now, if you're getting older like me, you know, and you got 20 years in the public service, the fact that you worked, you know, at McDonald's way back when, I don't think it's going to be very pertinent to know whether or not I'm applying on the next process. So, ça dépend toujours des gens. Puis, j'ai eu beaucoup de questions aussi, puis j'ai répondu à certaines des questions qui étaient ouvertes dans le chat à propos de l'expérience bénévole. Si je participe dans d'autres networks, if I'm part of other groups of discussions, networks, other jobs on the side, or I own my own business and everything else, of course. So that's helping me know you. Like, what's a staffing process? Well, you know, I get your CV and your application and I screen you in or out. And then I have about 20, 30 minutes to get to know you and to make a decision whether or not that I want to work with you for the rest of my life. Because you don't plan on people moving and, you know, you never know. Because maybe you will. My admin assistant's been following me around. So maybe I'm stuck with her for the rest of my career. That could be a good thing. So, you know, like it's telling me more about you. If you own your own business, depending on what it is and what you do, then I get to know a little bit more about you. If you're part of other networks, it might be pertinent for the job. We might be able to leverage them. If you're part of networks that are not pertinent for the job, but they demonstrate to me that if you're part of that network, then you have some competencies that are, you know, marketable. Ça fait partie de votre marque de commerce. And that's very, very important. You want us to get to know you the best within the limited amount of time that we can dedicate to that first encounter.
Simon, what you just said was brilliant in that sometimes I've seen people apply for jobs and they're not perfect for this job, but they're perfect for another job. And so getting to know them with what they've put on their CV and what they've put in their letter and the things that they've highlighted that they've done, sometimes hiring managers share that information and say, like, this person isn't perfect for what I need, but this person is perfect for what you're looking for. And so making sure that it really paints a good picture of you. And like Simon said, like your marque, your brand, and knowing, you know, what you would be good at so that managers can remember who you are, not just what you can do.
I just want to point out, Catherine, I think my job here is done because Jen said the last thing I said was brilliant. So if I have that once a day, I'm done.
Awesome. No, we need you, Simon. Don't leave us. We still have 15 minutes. So, but on that topic, before we go ahead and answer other questions, one of the questions I had for you guys was how much personal information should I include? So you've talked about networks. You've talked about I don't know if we've talked about pools and stuff like that, but do we put that information in our resumes? I know I I don't know if I'm doing it right. You can correct me and I'll use the tricks. But I know in my resume at the top, I have a quick summary of, I try to describe who I am as a person, as a public servant. I have my language evaluation in there, my security clearance, and if I'm in a pool, I'll put the number or the, whatever, the reference number and that information. Donc, est-ce que cette information-là est pertinente? Puis, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres informations plus personnelles? Donc, est-ce que je peux mettre l'information comme si je suis parent ou si je fais partie de d'autres choses? Je sais pas, mais ça pourrait être n'importe quoi. But est-ce que je peux mettre de l'information plus personnelle dans mon CV, in my resume? I don't know if Terry, maybe if you want to jump in.
Someone just recognized me here. So I was looking at my chat, my apologies. In terms of personal information, very little. Contact information, it would shock people to hear how many times they forget to update their contact information. Think of it as a student and then you first job, whatever, and you move. I was fairly transient, and it's so remarkable as an HR advisor when you're trying to track people down to invite them for the next stage of assessment, and it's like, oh, their contact information's incorrect. But beyond that, and meeting the education requires some personal information. You need to disclose the school. You do not need to disclose the year that you graduated. In terms of sensitivity, in terms of revealing your age. So, but personal information is very limited. It's not, and unless Simon or Jen have something else that's not, shouldn't be relevant to the role.
Jen, Simon, anything to add on that question? Quelque chose à ajouter?
I don't tend to add anything about me particularly personally, other than traits about my personality, my interests and my passions and what I can bring to the job. So I don't put anything about my marital status. I have started trying to strip off my regional, because I'm in a region. Everyone thinks I'm in Ottawa. So I'm like, maybe I should start pretending I am, because now it doesn't matter where I'm sitting anymore. I don't put that I have kids and that I love dogs and like that, because that stuff isn't necessarily relevant. Now, Simon's laughing because Simon, I know, loves dogs too. So, I mean, that's a great way to create a connection when you're networking, but it's not necessarily a good thing to put on a job application. So, but I do have a passion for networking. So that kind of stuff I do incorporate into the way I present myself in a letter and a resume, but I don't put personal things in there that don't belong in there, that aren't work related.
Simon, anything to add?
Je suis 100% d'accord avec Jen. Like, is it pertinent? Is it relevant? Personal information such as you're part of the provincial team in a sport. Okay, interesting. Means you're disciplined, mean you don't mind putting in the effort, and you can be passionate about something. Okay, that tells me something. The fact that you own a cat or a dog, okay, I like you a little better, but really that doesn't matter because you still need to pass the process, right?
Well, if your cat or dog is still alive, that's a good sign. Like, you can keep a pet alive, so you must be somewhat responsible. So that maybe, like, it's a stretch.
Yeah.
Do you have a fish?
You see, like,
no.
it's the pertinence of the information to the job that you're applying for that is important. And I see that we got one of the questions that it would have been great to show a good example of a resume. There's no such thing as a great resume. There is such a thing as your resume that can be perceived to be great. And one of the things that a lot of people, ask me often is, well, I didn't succeed on this process and I succeeded there. How come? Well, because over there they were searching for a certain type of candidate to do a certain type of jobs in a certain type of team. And over there, they were searching for something different. And you fit it over here and you didn't fit over there. Don't take it personal. And so there's no such a thing as the best resume or the best way to approach this. There's the way that you do things. And I see a lot of questions about that. And at the end of the day, if you can't send your CV in the language of your choice, do you really want to go to work for that person? And like, you know, you got to think about yourself as well. It's not just about getting the job. It's about getting a job that you're going to enjoy doing, working with people that you're going to like. Fait qu'il faut faire attention à ça. Il n'y a pas de bon prototype. Puis souvent, j'ai la question par rapport à des CV de compétences versus dans la fonction publique, à l'interne, on demande des critères d'expérience et ensuite de ça, de connaissances, compétences, capacités. Il faut répondre à ces critères-là. Fait qu'il faut s'assurer que la structure réponde à la mécanique du processus qu'on a actuellement dans la fonction publique aussi, au minimum.
Juste pour résumer rapidement ce que Simon disait tantôt, parce que ça répond à quelques questions qu'il y a dans la section Q&A, la section de questions-réponses. Il y avait des questions qui demandaient pour des exemples de CV, des bons CV, puis Simon disait qu'il n'y en a pas. C'est que ça dépend vraiment de c'est quoi le poste que tu appliques dessus, c'est quoi l'information que tu véhicules, comment tu réponds à tes questions. C'est quelque chose que, en tout cas, je devine, d'après tout ce qu'on a discuté aujourd'hui, qu'on développe par nous-mêmes un peu, essai-erreur, que ça veut pas dire, tu sais, c'est pas négatif si tu n'as pas passé à travers un processus, tu peux apprendre de ça, puis un peu comme on mentionnait au début, tu peux recevoir de la rétroaction sur tes processus, donc aller chercher cette information. Je vois que Jen aussi avait la main levée. Jen, did you want to add something?
No, I was just going to say that there are some samples that the Career Community Practice have put together on GC Connects. So the link to that is on our wiki if you want to go in and look at that. There's lots of ideas there of ways you can put together a great resume. But that's the problem with career development, is that there isn't one way to do things. There's not one path. There's not one resume. There's not one cover letter. So it's tricky for us to give you a template of what would work. Even if I gave you my resume that has worked for me, it might not even work for you. So I think it's just important to figure out what works for you and then have someone review it. There was a question I saw earlier in the chat, and I don't know if Simon answered it. I know that Simon has been multitasking and getting ahead of me and answering some of the questions. Who can review your resume? Ask a mentor, ask a hiring manager that you work with. I look over a resume quickly a couple times for some of my colleagues or my friends, and I'm like, okay, like already I can tell, like, this language, you need to fix the language. It's telling me too much. It's not telling me enough. It's not telling me the good stuff. Telling me that you answered the door when the mailman came, that's not helpful information. Like, you weren't just going to leave him in the hallway. So that doesn't tell me you did anything. And that isn't even initiative. Someone's knocking at the door, you answer the door, it's not initiative. So there's things you need to kind of weed out to really show your best self and show what you're able to do. And someone who looks at it quickly for you can help you to figure out that. And then you just kind of keep showing it to more people as time goes on, and it just gets better and better and more refined each time.
Juste le petit truc que Jen est en train de décrire, c'est de demander à un collègue ou un mentor ou n'importe qui en qui vous faites confiance de relire votre résumé, votre CV, vos questions, que ce soit une lettre de présentation, vos questions, même, j'imagine, Jen, de relire juste pour voir l'information que vous avez mise, est-ce que c'est pertinente, est-ce que ça fait du sens. Donc, it's important to you know, because it's easy for us to write our own things, but then a second lens or a second pair of eyes is always a good idea.
Or even find someone else who doesn't know what they're doing and read each other's and be like, oh, okay, neither of us know what we're doing, or you clearly know what you're doing and I don't, or let's work on it together and try to refine those skills, because a second pair of eyes is always going to help. Don't get a second pair of eyes from private sector. That's not going to help.
No.
So that's my tip of the day. Don't ask them.
I've made the mistake of once or twice asking my husband to go through my things, and he's like, there's way too much information. I was like, no.
This doesn't make sense. This is repetitive. I'm like, yeah. Never mind.
And make sure you do the reviews of the CV before having wine. That's very important.
Okay. Good tip.
Carrie, no comments.
Actually, venez de me faire penser à quelque chose. Now with Simon mentioning wine, I seem to have forgotten what I was going to say. I'm wondering if we should go on. There's a question, it looks like it's popped to the top. There's many times pools ask a lot of similar questions. Can we, actually, I think I've remembered what I wanted to add. Can we repeat our answers if there are a lot of overlap? I think when you look at a poster, especially that has, when someone says pools, there's different streams and everything. So yes, it looks like the same question or very similar questions being repeated. So my answer is that in terms of repeating, let's say, the same example or the same experience to address it, if it is the most relevant, and that's where you really have to, what Jen was talking about earlier in terms of ensuring your you keep track of what you've accomplished, of your background, of what you did where, to be able to express it clearly, to make sure, then you can do that analysis to say, yes, this is the best experience from my background to answer that particular factor. So there will be repetition if you had one fantastic recent experience and a role, and it ticks a lot of boxes for those qualifications. That's fine.
Juste rapidement, ce que Terry répondait à une question dans la section questions-réponses. Puis la question était, est-ce qu'on peut répéter les mêmes réponses quand on applique sur un bassin si les questions sont similaires d'une question à l'autre? Est-ce qu'on peut répéter les mêmes réponses? Puis Terry disait juste que ça dépend un peu si l'expérience ou l'exemple que vous utilisez est la plus à jour, la plus récente ou celle que vous voulez utiliser pour répondre à ces questions-là, oui, vous pouvez le faire, mais d'essayer quand même de varier les réponses quand vous appliquez sur des processus. J'essaie de voir s'il y a d'autres questions. I see Terry's answering one of the questions I was going to ask. But should you be going back to update the information contained in your inventory application? I'm guessing yes. Est-ce qu'on devrait aller mettre à jour notre information quand on applique sur des inventaires? Ou est-ce que c'est différent qu'un processus, là, mais les inventaires?
Oui.
Terry?
Je peux répondre parce que d'habitude, puis je vais le répéter en anglais, mais d'habitude, les inventaires indiquent quand est-ce que vous avez la capacité d'aller, dépendant de l'inventaire, si on parle de PFE, TE, FSWAP, ou un autre, parce que c'est des systèmes différents, les besoins sont différents. Donc, vous devez être notifié. Sinon, vous pouvez demander avec la communication qui est disponible, quand est-ce que vous pouvez mettre l'information à jour. Puis, c'est très important de le faire. So I'll just paraphrase as it's important to understand when you are able to update your information for an inventory or a pool. If it isn't indicated or you may be notified. If you haven't been notified, feel free to contact it's usually an HR person responsible or a generic email to find out when you can update your information. FSWAP is a little more straightforward in terms of we put a call out. I think we just did that recently.
We have 2 minutes before our event ends. Donc, on a 2 minutes de reste. En 2 mots, 3 mots maximum. Dernière question que j'ai pour vous, c'est as a hiring manager, how much weight are you putting on a resume? Donc, c'est quoi le poids que vous accordez à un CV en 2-3 mots parce qu'il nous reste maintenant à peu près 1 minute. So, allez, Jen, Terry, puis Simon.
I would say just make sure that you're using great language that shows that you put an effort into creating a great resume. I want something that's kind of showstopper, exciting to read. Because like Simon said, if you're reading 1,000, I want yours to be the one that makes me stop and want to read it.
Thanks, Jen. Terry?
We're out of time. I'll let Simon answer.
No, you still have a couple of seconds.
Go for it, Terry. You're on mute, Terry.
Yeah.
In terms of my staffing experience, it has really shifted over time. And again, the qualifications have to be in there. How you express them and explain them, demonstrate is either the screening questions or the cover letter. But so I would say the cover letter has diminished in in importance. However, it is still relevant.
Thanks, Terry. Simon?
Dans les processus internes, quand on demande une lettre de présentation, c'est sûr et certain que comme gestionnaire responsable, je vais lire la lettre de présentation, puis je vais m'attarder probablement très peu au CV. Sauf que si je reçois beaucoup de CV, en général, from left field, people networking and trying and or heard about me. Puis là, ben, à ce moment-là, le CV, c'est votre carte. C'est votre carte de commerce. C'est votre trademark. So, you know, if you read your CV and you wouldn't hire yourselves, like, don't send it. Like, your CV needs to represent you and you should be proud of it. You know, any job can sound boring. Any job can sound awesome. It depends on how you present it.
Those are great, great last words, closing words. Merci beaucoup à Jen, and Terry, à Simon. Thanks, Jen, Terry, and Simon, for joining us today. Thank you to everyone who participated. Please make sure to register for the next Fin Virtual Learning Series events. As you know, this month, we're going back to basics. So on March 16th, there is our Networking 101 session. And on March 23rd, it will be the Virtual Learning Series 1-year anniversary. And so Finn will be sharing kind of the origin story of the series. Donc, merci à tous les participantes. Je vous invite à aller vous inscrire aux prochaines sessions de la série d'apprentissage virtuel du réseau des jeunes. Ce mois-ci, on retourne aux notions de base. Et donc, le 16 mars sera notre session de réseautage 101. Et le 23 mars, nous célébrerons le premier anniversaire de la série. Alors, la session racontera un peu l'histoire et la conception de la série. C'est-tu fini?